Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm going to share my screen and introduce a few of the folks that are with me here, and then we'll get started. The idea basically is going to be a very quick presentation from my part, really just to kind of, and so for some of us here if you've done webinars before, been parts at other VIC, some of this will be review, but to set the stage for what part of first year planning is the small class experience itself. And then I will be throwing to one of our guests to sort of talk a bit more about the philosophy and the experience behind the small class experience. And then we open up for general question and answer. But let me just start actually with introductions all around. My name is Tom, and I'm one of the academic advisors at the Office of the Registrar and Academic Advising. And I'm going to start the presentation off. Let me also welcome my colleague who will be helping, especially with the questions that come up in the chat. Anna, say hi to everyone.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Cott. I'm one of the other academic advisors, and I'll pass it back to Tom.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, let me just introduce Professor Ira Wells.
Hi, everyone. Looking forward to chatting with you about small classes and VIC 100s, especially in a few minutes.
Great. Thank you. And welcome to all of you. So if you have questions that come up during the session, please don't hesitate to pop them into the chat. Sometimes they're quick and easily answered, or sometimes they're good to collect for us to bring up again towards the end when we have the more open question and answer. Otherwise, we'll just get started and try to get through the material and to leave some time for any questions and answers that come up. I'm going to start, as I start all our sessions, with an acknowledgement of the land that Victoria College rests on and that we all must consider. So as we gather together virtually as Victoria College community, we acknowledge the sacred land on which the University of Toronto operates. It has been the site of human activity for 15,000 years. This land is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Piton First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. The territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy, the Confederacy of the Ojibwe, and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We at Victoria College are also mindful of broken covenants and the need to strive to make things right in all our relations. And this is held both collectively and individually for those of us who work at the University of Toronto as we strive forward towards the goals of truth and reconciliation and betterment all around. And here are some links to some resources. If you want to learn more about the ongoing processes of truth and reconciliation and some of the information about what it means to acknowledge land, both in terms of understanding history and contemporary reality, and also a sustainable way of viewing the earth. So to talk about small classes, what I'm going to do is briskly remind everyone a little bit what it means to sort of frame your first year course selection. Because at VIC, we have this requirement about the small class experience, but how does it fit into the framework? So remembering that the degree you get at U of T in arts and science is a 20 credit degree, and assuming that basically that looks at about 5 credits a year to make progress through a 4-year degree, 5 credits becomes kind of the template of the 100% course load. This is the normal full-time course load in a fall-winter session, made up of half or full credit courses. Half courses are worth a half credit, or full courses are worth a full credit. And students pick from a variety of full and half-year courses to make up this frame. And as we look at a typical first year, and I emphasize typical, not everyone's first year, because these frames of reference change a little bit, you can probably assume that one of your priorities will be to pick out the courses in first year that connect to the programs you want to study. So these will be the foundational courses that either are needed as you advance in a program, or if it's a program that may be limited enrollment, which means you have to request and get admitted into the program after first year, you may be taking the first year courses that make you eligible to try to get into the program. That tends to take about 2 to 3 credits. On the other side, I'll come back to small class, you may be using first year to explore areas of interest or complete breadth requirements. And I'll touch a little bit more about that, but the small class experience is there as well. It's either a half or a full credit. That's what's required for VIC students. The exception being if you're transferring in as a post-secondary student, and so you're coming in basically not in first year, you don't have to meet this requirement. Also, commerce students don't have to meet this requirement. And last but not least, if you're in a ONES program, you're already considered meeting this requirement. So the focus here is on all the other VIC students and what they choose to be their small class experience in among their first year courses. And VIC highly values and appreciates this opportunity and tries to put forward lots of options to students. And taking a small class really is about a little bit of exploration, but it could also be about your program of interest. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And in fact, I've already anticipated this slide. I got ahead of myself. So a reminder, ONES students in ONES programs, or if you're in commerce, this is not something you necessarily need to take. But when you do take a small class requirement, it can do lots of things for you. Small class courses are like any other course, they're worth degree credit, and they usually have a breadth requirement category. So you can use a small class experience to meet a breadth requirement. You can also use it, though, to sort of complement what you're doing in terms of your programs of study. If your focus is on particular programs, you may aim for a small class experience that adds more perspective and more sort of specialized lens on some of the issues or topics or themes that are part of that area of study. And all the departments and programs pretty much in arts and science offer their own small classes in first year called first year foundations. And you can usually tell a first year foundation because the 3-letter designator is the same as the department, but the actual codes start usually with a 1 and 9. That holds for most of the courses that are first year foundation courses. Now, last but not least, of course, you can use small class experiences to go outside the focus areas of your program of study. Maybe you're using the small class to take a topic area that's not part of what you want to study, but it has always interested you, a topic or a theme. Maybe you're in the sciences, but you really want to take a small class experience about a moment in history or a particular author or themes in literature. There's so many opportunities in that respect. If you want, the modules that we have as part of the Get Ready for VIC modules on Quarkus include module 3, which is about choosing courses, includes a small sample of small class experiences that are tied to certain areas like first year commerce, first year humanities and such, in case you want to find some that are somewhat connected to areas of disciplines and modes of study. That maybe is what interests you. Now, with that very broad perspective there, I will sort of step back from any other topics around sort of planning first year courses and let the session be taken over by Ira Wells to talk a little bit more about the philosophy behind small classes and why at VIC this is really important a part of first year education.
Thank you very much, Tom. And it's really a pleasure to be here this afternoon with everyone. I wonder if you would just humor me for a moment, if I could call upon everyone to, I'd just like to learn a little bit more about who's with us today. First of all, could I just ask you to write in the chat where you are, physically where you are at this moment? Burlington, Los Angeles, Toronto, Hong Kong, Toronto, British Columbia, Brampton, South Korea, Ottawa, Florida, Michigan, Finland, Hamilton, Boston, Toronto, Sao Paulo, Budapest, Mumbai, Kitchener, Vaughan, Niagara Falls, Istanbul. Wow, that is a really awesome cross section of the world that we have there. This really is a global session. My mind is boggling thinking what time it must be for some of you right now. But that's really amazing. Thank you so much for letting me know that. I'm broadcasting from my basement in Toronto. Hopefully we're coming to the end of this. We're certainly looking forward to welcoming you to our beautiful campus in the fall. If I could ask one more question of you, if you've thought a little bit about what you intend to study, that could be like a specific major, right? Or just an area, right? So you might, just any sense of what you hope to study. If you would throw that into the chat. Commerce, again, it could be something specific like biochem, neuroscience, could be just like science, arts, neuroscience, psych, computer science, anthro-linguistics, law or philosophy, English, cinema studies. Does anyone not have a very clear sense of what they hope to say? Like no idea or just yet to? I hope you don't have to write anything in the chat if you don't want to, but I kind of hope that there are some people out there who don't know exactly where your education is going to take you, because that's something that university can be a process of discovery. It can, and I think oftentimes works as a process of self-discovery, among other things, and learning, what you're interested in and where your skills lie and how you can match those skills to, or those interests and those passions to things that you're learning about the world, different kinds of problems in the world. That's a really exciting thing too. And so as we continue to talk about small classes in this session, I hope that you'll be open to the idea of maybe taking something a little outside, maybe not outside your comfort zone, but something that wouldn't necessarily, something that you're just intrinsically interested in, something that fascinates you, that you've always had an interest for, maybe something outside what you imagine your major of study to be, or your specialist, because that's another great way of thinking about small classes and their place in the university experience. So I'm just going to share my screen now for a moment. 1 second as I get that figured out. And I'll tell you a little bit about the small class experience here at Victoria College and our approach. So we are, as you will soon, or probably have already gotten a sense, that we are very dedicated to small classes at Victoria College for a variety of reasons. Small classes are really kind of our thing. And as Tom mentioned, we do have a small class requirement. And one terrific way to satisfy that requirement is by taking a Vic 100 course. Now, I realize that there's all kinds of nomenclature and all kinds of concepts and terminology that's being thrown at you. And one of the I can anticipate that one potentially confusing thing is the difference between Vic 1 and Vic 100. So Vic 1 is a standalone program, right? And that's distinct from Vic 100s, which are just one-off classes that we're talking about here today. So Vic 1 is a program that consists of 2 full credits, and there's extracurricular components and a separate application and everything else. And Vic 100 is our one-off classes that any student who is not already in Vic 1, including I hope many of you, can take. Was there a question that I heard? And if not, could we, if that was an accidental unmuting, maybe we could just do a quick mute of everyone. Happy to take a question now, though, if there is one. Okay. So as you probably can guess or have intuited, higher education has changed a lot over just even your lifetimes. As institutions of higher learning, forget the pandemic and the massive change that brought, but even before that, higher education was coming to grips with the potential of online learning platforms, MOOCs, massive open online classes, all kinds of learning platforms and all the rest. But bigger isn't always better, especially when it comes to education. And at Victoria College, we remain committed to the ideals of small classes and conversation-based learning. And what I'm calling conversation-based learning really has its foundations in the thinking of and practice of Socrates, who lived nearly 2,500 years ago. Socrates believed that people learn best through reflection and questioning of their own assumptions, thinking through why we come to certain beliefs and attitudes about the world, thinking about the attitudes that underlie those beliefs. The idea is that students are not simply repositories of knowledge, right? That you don't just come to university to get filled up with the answers and then get sent on your way, but that students are active participants in the creation of new knowledge, and that new knowledge is created, among other ways, through conversation. One of our Vic 1 professors, and in fact, one of the founders of Vic 1, Paul Gooch, published a book a couple of years ago called Course Correction, in which he said, Socrates had no institutional structure, no building, no curriculum for his inquiries into what makes the lives of human beings good. Undergraduate education that is Socratic is carried out in a structured interrogative conversation, which can be pursued anywhere, as long as there are competent teachers and willing students. The pursuit of philosophical questions in ancient Athens took place outdoors, walking about in open places. Likewise, the development of effective habits and attitudes for the pursuit of knowledge in undergraduate programs should not be confined to the classroom. Education is more than a matter of accumulating enough credits for a degree. So you'll hear a lot about what it takes to gather the appropriate credits, the appropriate breadth requirements, the appropriate credits for your major. It can feel dizzyingly complex, but I just would like to linger on this idea that really what this is all about, what your university education is all about, is a kind of education that is about acquiring habits of mind. It's about having conversations. It's about the kind of growth that is not only measured through acquiring credits, and that you may learn as much or more from your peers, from the kinds of conversations that happen outdoors, or happen outside of the classroom. And I think this is something that you really have to learn while you're at university, right? That some of the most memorable moments and some of the greatest moments of learning may actually happen when you least expect them, right? The university is what allows this to happen. But one of the greatest advantages and one of the greatest benefits of university is the group of people who are going through it together in a community. And we're really committed to the idea at Vic that education takes place in a community. So regardless of which small class you pick, I think that your professor will be committed to this idea that your education is more than simply acquiring credits. And in fact, the motto of Victoria College is Abuent Studia in Mores. Just in case you don't know Latin, that means studies pass into character. Okay, there are, of course, some more concrete benefits as well, and I'll just quickly speak to a few of them. So when I talk about small classes, I'm talking about classes that our seminars are capped at 25. And I'll just run through maybe 4 quick benefits about why we are such a fan of this idea at Vic. One is you, the community of peers that forms in these classes, getting to know your professor, habits of mind, and lastly, student success. So I'll just quickly speak to the first one. Classes that are capped at 25 allow you to develop an actual peer network, right? We know that it can feel intimidating when you're in a class of 200 or 500 or 800 to even speak to the person next to you. It can feel, it can be intimidating to make those kinds of social connections. This is not to knock large first-year classes. They're necessary, and in some ways, they do what they do very well. But we also believe that you have something to gain by going through this experience in a community, and we want you to enjoy some of the benefits of these small classes, not least of which is having a group, a cohort, a like-minded group of individuals, and this kind of tight-knit community that will allow you to feel like you're part of something, that will allow you to feel like you're not on your own at university. It brings with it all kinds of benefits, small things like just having a conversation with someone afterward, or it can be whether it comes to studying for the midterm, working together, talking through ideas. The benefits are really remarkable. The second is getting to know your prof. Now, again, and if you imagine that class of 1,000, it can be feel awfully intimidating to approach your professor after a class. If you've got an idea that you want to talk through, or if you want to chat through an assignment, we know that many students never speak to their professors in first year, and that's one thing that we're trying to mitigate against. You will, in your Vic 100 course, if you take one, you will have a professor who will know you by name, who will get to know you as a person and be invested in your success and your interests. Habits of mind. This gets back a bit to the Socratic method that I was mentioning off the top, but a really cool thing that happens in university in these kind of small class environments is that you can start to get a sense that your way of approaching a problem, your way of approaching an issue of a text, which may feel completely natural, might also be very different from someone who had been educated in a different part of the world, who might be coming at this from a totally different kind of subject position. Part of the value is not simply learning the content, but learning how other people are apprehending and approaching that content. That we can learn as much from one another as we can from the object of study. And then lastly, student success. So this is not, well, it's no secret. It's institutionally acknowledged that students tend to do better in smaller classes. It's just it's a fact. It has to do probably with the fact that students get more individualized attention from their professors. It's easier to ask for help. There's less of an intimidation factor in asking for help. But students tend to do better in smaller classes, and that success tends to have a knock-on effect, which is to say that after you do well in that small class, in your second or third year, if you have to get a letter of recommendation to enter a program or to apply for a fellowship, if you've already had a great experience with a professor who knows you very well, that's a natural connection that you have. So that's the success is not only in the individual class, but carries forward down the line. So regardless of which small classes you'll take, and I hope we'll have a chance to speak in a bit more detail about the actual courses that we're offering next year, and I can certainly talk through some of those specifics as well, Tom, depending on how we're doing for time. But regardless of which one you take, if you take a Vic 100 course, you will find that your Victoria College professor is friendly, invested in your success, and that we are dedicated to creating inclusive and environments that are challenging in the best ways classes that will push you to think through your assumptions, challenge you, and maybe even provoke a kind of change, the kind of process of self-discovery that university at its best is all about. So I will turn things back over to Tom, but happy to take questions as well, or to go through the offerings for next year as well. So Tom, how would you like to take it from here?
Well, let's kind of take it a little bit of both. I just want to say thank you for all the questions that are coming out in the chat already. I just want to suggest that what we'll do is we'll focus at first on the questions that specifically relate to small class experiences, though I do know that Anna has been very gamely going through the chat and answering many of these questions to give links and stuff as needed. And then if there's time at the end, of course, we're happy to open it up wider to sort of general questions about first year course planning and such like that. I know some people have asked about that. I just want to maybe it's sort of a bridge though, and Anna did a very good job, but just so everyone knows the question was asked and answered, all small classes have a breadth requirement category like every other course. So whatever small class experiences you decide to choose, a half course or 2 half courses or 1 full credit course, it's contributing to your breadth requirement like every course does. And the breadth requirement process is something that maybe I can put a pin in and deal with towards the end, but just to sort of quickly summarize it, because it's an overall degree requirement, this need to take courses from different 5 categories of courses throughout to sort of give a rounded sense of your degree. It is true that when you explore first year courses, sometimes you might choose something outside what you plan to study as a way to tick the box for some of these categories outside what you will normally do. But I would say, though, it's not something you have to do in first year. So it's nice sometimes it captures some of the breadth requirements in first year, but it doesn't have to be your driving force. And I say that because it helps me segue back to some of the things that I think Ira was talking about, which is being able to proceed on interest, whether that is directly focused on the kind of things you're also about your programs of study, or interests that you have intrinsically that may not connect to the programs of study you're interested in, but are still an abiding interest. You can find a lot in the small class experiences across the departments and in the Vic 100s that can really scratch an itch and give you that amazing experience to explore a very sort of focused, thematic, or issue-based sort of topic in that environment. I just want to also summon an important point that Ira raised, which is that a lot of what we talk about this time of year going into September, all the different ways that students will find themselves adapting to university life. And that can mean lots of different things. But it is also very true that I think every student does a bit of adapting when you go into university, and that's because you've been adapting your learning your entire journey up to and including now. So it's not something to be intimidated by, it's something to embrace. But it's certainly true, I think, that the small class experience, as Ira described it, gives you a really good leg in, because that process of talking and being close to other students and learning from your students, getting access to a professor and being able to engage in that community way in a small class really can help start to develop your sense of understanding what university is all about, almost in maybe not an accelerated way, but in a very personalized way. And that can be an amazing experience on top of all the other experiences you're getting in the big courses and other courses you might be taking in interest. With that in mind, I'm going to throw some questions out. I'll take a tack at it, but I'll ask Ira too as well. One of them was basically, do you recommend taking students in commerce, if they can, taking a small class? I will give my answer, which is yes, but Ira, if you want to sort of talk a little bit about that as well, or you feel you want to jump in on that.
Sure. Oh, sorry, Tom, go ahead and finish.
No,
your
please.
thought, please.
It's just, I think Anna's pointed out that the reason has a lot to do with pragmatics, that it's a crowded sort of set of courses for first year commerce students. But nevertheless, we have seen commerce students take small class experiences and even be part of the ONES program, which is a real feat. But Ira, why don't you add in anything from your experience with any commerce students you've met or have taken small class experiences?
Yeah, so we do have a stream of Vic 1 called the Chambers stream, which is geared to pair with Rotman Commerce. We know that that it's a particularly onerous slate of required courses, and so it's not always possible for commerce students to take a small class, and that explains the exemption. If it works with your schedule, and if there's something that looks interesting to you, I certainly wouldn't I wouldn't dissuade you from doing it, and I think that there's a lot of benefit to it. But I don't want to add to the, if it turns out that something's just not going to fit with the schedule this year, or that you feel as though the required the courses that you have to take for your program are already giving you a very full first term or first year, then I wouldn't worry too much about it. But it's certainly a nice thing to do if you can.
Yeah, I think I agree. And I'm just jumping into sharing my screen again. There's a few more slides, but I know some of the questions that came up was also about just finding small classes. So Anna's shared some links, but let me just go over them a little bit. The academic calendar of arts and science has a page where they scoop up all the small classes across the different departments and colleges and put them in one spot. And so it's a great one-stop shop for a lot of small class experiences that are possible, whether from first year foundations courses that are offered by departments up to and including the Vic 100s. But you can also find a list of the Vic 100s both on the Victoria website, but perhaps even equally valid is jumping to the Victoria College part of the academic calendar, where you see all the Vic sponsored courses from Vic 1s all the way through to the hundreds. And as I mentioned, module 3 of the Getting Ready for Vic also talks a little bit about the courses that could be of interest. And on that subject, Ira, you mentioned talking a little bit about the menu of what we have coming up this year. And I went ahead and I scooped up what I could find from the course list and such, and that fall Vic 100s. And this ties to another question, which is every Vic 100 offering offered every year? And the answer is not quite. It's usually some subset of the vast offerings, which is true for a lot of courses in arts and science, which have sort of very focal topics, that there may be sort of rotation covering a large swath, but not necessarily every one. And this is what I scooped up just from this year, and partly just to be able to show the variety of thematic areas that you could find really interesting, and which can touch both on sort of subject areas that might be related to what you to study, or you may just want to jump on in. For example, psychology and society, obviously super attractive to people who might be doing psychology in the life sciences or the social sciences. There are some here that are more related to history and such like this, but there are some of these that are just, let's face it, interesting. Whatever you're interested in studying, you just, for someone like me, I might decide I just want science and science fiction. I just think that's that may be that it just taps into something that you're really interested in, and that gives a bit of perspective on that point. Ira, any particular, I don't want you to call out one Vic 100 over the other, but any comments on the offerings this year?
Yeah, sure. Let me just quickly chime in on a few of them, just simply because our titles are intentionally and deliberately kind of, they're not the most specific. So, for example, Ethics and Choices in Times of Crisis, I know that the professor who's teaching that course this year is a really world-class history professor named Eric Jennings, who is teaching it on collaboration and resistance in World War II France. So that will be specifically looking at the case study of World War II France and the ways in which constituencies within France were resisting and collaborating with the Nazi regime in World War II. Psychology and society, that one, I would say, if you even think that you might be mildly interested in taking that class, find out the exact moment that you can register and make that the first thing that you're registering in. For whatever reason, that course, Psychology and Society, that is like the most popular Victoria College class since I think the days of like Northrop Frye. Like it has a waiting list of like 75 each time. We offer it twice a year, fall and at the first and second semesters, and which is not to dissuade you from taking it. You absolutely should. It's that popular for a reason, but just make that your priority. Get in that one and then sort the other courses out. Belonging, imagination, and national identity. So that's actually, again, kind of a broad topic or a broad title. That course is specifically on Indigenous films. So it looks at how films frame Indigenous identity in relation to both Indigenous communities and larger non-Indigenous nations where these communities reside, and looks at Indigenous responses to historical and ongoing harms of colonialism and healing. What else can I say about this list? Renaissance and popular culture. That's a fun class that if you're interested in like not only Shakespeare and Elizabethan England, but also like how that era is represented in, like, I know that they play through a video game, for example. They really look in very broad pop culture ways at the Renaissance, and so if Elizabethan England and Shakespeare and all the rest is of interest to you, that is certainly a course that you might want to watch out for. Let's see, Understanding the Performing Arts. I think that course is looking at like Cirque du Soleil and circuses and that sort of area of performing arts this year. Evaluating healthcare. I think that has focused quite specifically on COVID the last couple of years. I hope that you're not totally COVIDed out yet, but it has looked at how we measure and how we use scientific methodologies to formulate. And this is, I think, carries through in Vic 122, which focuses a bit more on the public policy side of the data. So how we arrive at the data in 121 and Vic 122 on how that data is transformed into public policy decisions. And then I'll just quickly add on how to study everyday life. So that that course is, again, it's kind of a broad sounding one, but it is focused quite intently on social media and on how every aspect of our lives is now mediated, and so that course pays attention to platform economies, how we study and media life and platforms and apps, and how we socialize and play and connect and entertain ourselves online. Yes, Discovery and Revolution is also quite a broad sounding title that is specifically discovery and revolution in the period of the Renaissance, 1350 to 1700, and how discoveries and revolutions and innovations in culture and society in that period really changed the course of human history. So that's just a quick gloss on some of these courses and things that might not be obvious from the titles in the list.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. There's actually someone who noticed that you skipped past one of the titles that's really a doozy, which is The Death of Meaning. So I'm going to come back to you on that. But let me just, because it sounds like if you take that course, do all the other courses lose meaning? But we'll see how that turns out. But let me just a couple of practical points that Anna's been picking up, and then I'll come back to the Death of Meaning. I just like saying that out loud.
I'm happy to speak to that one when we get a chance. But go ahead.
Yeah. We'll come back to it. I just want to say that some people wisely asked about the section part. So this is actually relates to how courses will eventually appear in the timetable. And Anna pointed out, but just to make sure it's clear, the course code, like Vic 110 H1, that tells you everything about the course, including the weight and who's offering it and what its individual designator is. But the section tells you and is used when the timetable comes out or when the course list times out to tell you in what part of the fall-winter session, or in the case of the summer, in the summer session, the course is actually offered. So the F courses that means essentially fall, but they're offered from September to December, and S can be from January to April. And half courses, like all of these, typically fall in one semester or the other. As you notice, at least one of the courses that's quite popular seems to have both a fall and winter offering. And Ira made a mention of the fact that some of these courses tend to fill up faster because they're small classes. Somebody asked if in fact there's any sort of guarantee or any concerns about getting into the course. And of course, in practical terms, you're absolutely right. When these courses are capped at 25, it means that when you're thinking about your small class experience, you should probably have a few lined up to consider. Jump on your start time on your day to get to and sometimes it's even a suggestion to start with your small classes to get them locked in and then move on to the bigger classes where there's more room and space, but have a few backup plans. Luckily, not only are the small class experiences sort of plentiful, there are many that are interesting. So having a few in your roster that you're interested in grabbing will be a big help for you to kind of nab something that you like in that front. And let me see if I think that was one last question, which just came up, which is that about language courses. You would think that in language courses, a small class experience is vital. And of course it is, but the demand for language classes means that they don't really qualify as small class experiences because the numbers in the lectures still tend to be larger, especially in introductory language classes. So what big courses do very often is have tutorials that are part of what you schedule when you go into the timetable, and tutorials break up the class into smaller groups, and that's how they help engage in the conversational and the interactive parts of that learning. I see more questions are coming up. I'm going to just pause and come back to it because it's great, but I can't resist coming back to the Death of Meaning. So Ira, you want to take that on?
Sure. Yeah. So that course really begins with Darwin's theory of evolution, according to which human beings are not qualitatively different from the rest of the animal kingdom, but rather products of evolution, and how this challenged the longstanding idea of humans as exceptional beings at the center of God's creation, or at least as at the top of the tree of life. And while Darwin himself did not explicitly draw atheistic conclusions from those findings, many others did. And so the course examines the question of human beings' place in the grand scheme of things by reading and discussing a series of classic texts that range across science, politics, philosophy, literature, thinking about the challenge to meaning and truth that came through that was a kind of after effect of society coming to grips with the fact that human beings arising from the theory of evolution.
Amazing. And, it's a pervasive sort of cycle of process as we sort of establish cherished meanings and they get challenged quite suddenly and quite profoundly. Couple of other quick sort of small class / administrative things. Anna answered one of them. When you're planning your fall winter, you are planning your entire 8 months. So when you enroll in classes, it's vital that you are enrolling in all the classes that start from September to April. So when you're planning your schedule, you're looking at all 8 months because it's all happening at that time. While obviously the courses that start in January have more time for people to maybe change them and such, the primary occupancy of classes starts when course enrollment starts in July. So you need to kind of land yourself in the courses you want across those 8 months in that time. The fall winter is considered in that sense one academic session with its beginning, middle, and end. There's another question though, a bit about sort of, I guess in a way, shopping. If you choose a small class course, but then it becomes a conflict, can you drop it? Yes, but a couple of points on that. One is that you still need to have a small class experience. So that's why it's really vital to have a few backup plans like that in case you need to swap it for something else that doesn't cause a course conflict. But two, since you will have when the timetable comes out properly, and that's going to be the end of this month. And when the timetable comes out, it will give more detail than this slide I have up right now. It'll be a way to look at all the courses, what days and times they're offered, and the different sections and such. What you can do at that point is just plan everything in advance. So you're not setting up a small class course that's automatically going to conflict with everything else. You start to pre-pick all the courses and see what comes, and then you might have to do a bit of adapting on the day, but hopefully not so much if you've planned out the composition of the courses you want to take in first year. So thank you for that.
Can
Another
I
question?
for a
Yes, go
second,
ahead.
Tom?
Please,
Just
please,
because
Anna.
there is a question here that asks for, do small classes have final exams? Ira, would you be able to speak to whether the Vic 100s classes have them, and also any of the Vic 1? I know with some of the other first foundation courses, it really depends on the professor quite often, but would you be able to have any additional comments, Ira?
Yeah, so there's not one answer because, as you say, Anna, it is up to the professor. But just looking at this list, certainly not very many of them have final exams, if any. So I think in the vast majority of the cases on this list, you would expect to have a final essay or a final assignment. But there might be one or two on this list that would have a final exam, but not very many.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's commonly true. The first year foundations classes and departments, Anna's absolutely right. The style of the material and how it's tested in terms of assignments or essays might vary quite a lot. And there are some types of areas of study where testing sometimes makes more sense. But broadly, I think Ira's sort of point on Vic 100s makes a lot of sense because it's sort of discussion and elaboration based. It's often best assessed by sort of being able to work out your thoughts in a format of a kind of an assignment or essay. No guarantees, but that's a likely outcome in that respect. There's a couple of other questions that come up. One I just can jump to because it's on the slide is can any more Vic 100 show up apart from this list? Right? Planning is probably pretty much done, but one always keeps an eye on the timetable, no matter what you're looking at, to make sure there aren't any sort of fine changes or details, because sometimes opportunities or other developments occur, which can make sort of shifts in the course offering. So keep an eye on it. But unless Ira has something else to say, I would say that as you see the timetable come out, you can probably consider the Vic 100 list there to be pretty solid in what you can expect for the upcoming year. Ira, is there anything else people should consider on that front?
That's right. That's accurate what you said. There are I think 2 or possibly 3 more Vic 100 courses that may have just been lopped off the bottom of the list just because they have higher numbers. So there's one is Vic 198. It's called Posters and Propaganda, which specifically looks at how political posters have been used over the years and what forms they take and how propaganda has changed and the political movements that have used them, and the connection between art and propaganda, and you know, questions around like, is art, can propaganda be art, and so on. And I think that they in fact look at a number of physical, like archival holdings, like they go into the archives and look at political posters that have been used through the years. There's one more called Vic 199, which is called Thinking with Things, the Secret Life of Objects, which examines the materiality of objects and how artifacts are made and how they're circulated, and how an object can tell a story, and looks at collections all around, in collections from all around the university and Toronto, to develop an understanding of how objects are studied and analyzed. So yeah, and I think we're trying to get a detective fiction course off the ground, but we've had a staffing issue there, but hopefully there'll be a detective fiction course too next year.
It's a great catch, Hannah. In fact, there's even more on offer than I managed to fit on one slide. So it's good to check all the sources that things come out. And another good point was raised when you go on the Acorn tool, and I'm glad you're using the Acorn tool. There are sections and times that are already there. I think you can start to imagine a preliminary sort of idea, but I will echo Anna's observation. You want, when the timetable comes out, to use it as the most up-to-date information about what the courses will be offered, what semesters they're going to be offered in, and their days and times, and even the professors. That'll be, you should probably wait to sort of really get into the planning when that comes out. But it's a great question. There's another question about priority controls, and I believe, Anna, you may know this better than I do. Is there any, do all students get the same priority access to Vic 100s as first-year students?
This was a question I was actually going to pose back to Ira, if he can give us a scoop as to whether students will have priority. They have in the past,
okay,
but I didn't know if that was still going to happen this year, as the final timetable has not come out. And so, Ira, if you can give us the scoop.
Yes, Victoria College students do have priority for the first, I think it's 2 weeks. There's a priority window. I can't remember off the top of my head if it's 1 week or 2 weeks. But the answer to that question is yes. Victoria College students will have a priority enrollment period, and after which point it opens up to the Faculty of Arts and Science.
Great question. Nice one. I guess there's a plea here, wondering if Vic 105 Odysseys, The Search for Meaning, is coming out this year. You know, any sort of gossip about whether it's one of the things you can pull off, or is it not on roster this year?
Unfortunately, I think that one is on the bench this year, but if there's huge popular demand, maybe we can get it back in some subsequent year, which would of course be too late. So unfortunately, I don't think that we'll be up for an Odyssey this time around, but thanks for letting me know. It's good to know that that's one that they might be interested in the future.
Yeah, there's nothing quite so as sort of the moment when you sort of the offerings are so amazing, but sometimes if your timing is just not quite right, you may see the one and that wasn't its year. But there's so many other great offerings as well. Actually, this ties to one question that I saw, which I think Anna may have responded to, but just in case, I'll raise it. Small class experiences are designed for first-year students. So in fact, as you advance on, the WIC 100 offerings aren't something you can take, unfortunately. It would be nice, but the idea is that, as we already talked about, they're small class experiences. So the spaces are coveted and sort of proportionally set up in a way to be able to meet the needs of first-year students, and that doesn't leave room, unfortunately, for upper-year students. So this is your opportunity to sort of embrace what's out there and grab them and enjoy them in that way. And I just want to flag that Anna's pointed out the timetable, we don't have an exact date, but we're expecting at the end of June. They're just finalizing a lot of the details, as you can imagine, and sort of produce that so it's well ahead of when the course enrollment starts, which for fourth-year students starts in early July, and then will eventually move to first-year students later in July. At this point, we're about 9 minutes in. Please continue to ask any questions. Oh, all right, here's a great one. Do you run Vic 100 courses in the summer, as in after first year? My recollection is, actually, I think it's no, but I better throw to Ira. Is it true that 100 courses don't tend to be offered in the summer?
Yeah, in fact, our unit, Victoria College, doesn't run courses in the summer. It's just a historical legacy thing that we don't offer any courses in the summer. So one way in which this might be useful to you is if you're, let's say that you're as you're putting your schedule together and it's sort of down to a couple of different courses and you're not sure which one you're going to take. Some departments do offer courses over the summer. So let's say like you're looking at an English course or a history course or a political science course. Most of the big units will offer their first year courses over the summer, and we don't. So if there's a small first year course, if there's a Vic 100 course that you're looking at, I think in a sort of tiebreaker situation, there could be a rationale for including that one in the 8 months of the year, and then taking another units course over the summer. But it would be advisable to check with the undergraduate chair of that unit just to make sure that the course that you're hoping to take over the summer actually is, because there can be a bit of variation there. But one thing upon which there's no variation is that unfortunately we do not offer courses over the summer.
Great, thank you. Another great question, which I will throw to all because it's actually a really interesting question, and it's maybe hard to answer, but there may be some things. The question from Amy is there any difference between college 100 courses like Vic or Trin and other small department seminars like Lin 198 or something like that? You've tapped on all the small class sort of experience offerings and such, so I'll start by saying that there are, but the difference is basically between sort of topics as much as anything else. So each small class experience is designed with a sort of some kind of thematic or conceptual focus, or it could be a point in history, it could be a theme, it could be an area of study within a discipline or across multiple disciplines that pulls together ideas that the professor is passionate about and that really lends itself to sort of discussion and contemplation and conversation within a small class experience. That common line being true, the world's are oyster in terms of what departments and professors at Victoria College might put together when they propose small class experiences and such. It can really run the gamut in that way. The other thing about small class experiences, they tend not to be, with the exception of possibly political science, most 100 level, these small class experiences, first year foundations or Vic 100s and so forth, don't tend necessarily to meet program requirements. There's some exceptions and important exceptions. Some of the Trin 1's programs count towards programs, and political science allows you to use one of their first year foundations as a half course in the first year to be part of the whole credit you need to get into political science. But otherwise, it's again, like I say, it's kind of a real spread. But let me throw to you, Ira, to sort of talk a little bit about kind of if you have any thoughts on sort of that variety and commonality between all the different small class experiences that are possible out there.
Yeah, I think that was all really well put, and I don't have an awful lot more to say. I mean, I think that what you said off the top about the fact that each unit tends to have its own kind of wheelhouse in terms of topics. Each obviously the departments run small first year foundation courses specifically in their subject matter area, right? So chemistry is looking at topics specifically in chemistry. History is looking at specifically historical topics. I think one of am I right, Tom, in remembering that there's one called Drunk History? Is that still a course?
Yeah, yes, there is something that was kind of meant to sort of evoke, I think, the very popular and not for young audiences series on the Comedy Network and such, but is actually, despite the attention-grabbing title, isn't exactly what it would expect, which is actually about historical writings about drunkenness, how it appears and is talked about both socially and historically, in terms of society and the different ways that drunkenness is sort of interpreted and reflected on and so forth. And so sometimes you can also find that drilling past through the title will help a little bit because they may be an eye catcher, but it helps to sort of lean in and see what it's about. There's a few other sort of, I'm just going to share my screen towards the end just to kind of to be mindful of sort of some of the ways to kind of to sort of be able to sort of find out what categories of courses we're talking about. What is your resources? Adriana, don't worry about asking the question. It is, but basically the good news is 100 level Vic 100 and other small class experiences are in plentiful supply for first year students, but you have to be in first year to take one. It's not something that's available in the upper years. Now, let me just share my screen briefly. I'm going to turn 2 sections of the academic calendar is what I'm going to be looking at here. And the first one I got right up is actually, I hope you make me dizzy when I scroll, but I'm in the academic calendar and in the section of Victoria College. And the question was just how do you sort of find these things? So Vic goes through all the different courses and programs that find their home at Victoria College. Here we go. Finally showed up. So you see the Vic 1s and such like this, but you can see the full list of what's been proposed and accepted as Vic 1 courses all the way here in the Vic 100. You see it goes all the way down. But a note that the actual offerings in a given year, that's what you connected to the timetable and such like that to make sure that you can be sure what subset of this is actually on offer in a given year. And overall, again, this is just what everything is possible, but now I tell you exactly what's offered in a given year. The first year foundation section on the academic calendar under F, luckily, also just pulls together all the small class experiences across the different areas and such. And you can always drill down. If there was a question here about what LIN meant, that was linguistics. So if you're not sure, some of these things you might guess by the title and the 3 letters, some you might not. But if you're not sure, for example, you can usually just sort of write in the course code in the calendar. There's a little course code search right here, and you can jump into it, and it will tell you immediately more about the course, and you can jump into the area and it tells you where it is and such. So there are always ways to sort of find your ways through and be able to sure you can interpret whatever those 3 letters happen to mean. Because the 3-letter codes is our way of doing things, but sometimes there are more popular letters than others. So there's a little bit of a tight real estate sometimes. So you may need a little help deciphering and decoding these things. Great question towards the end. We have a couple of minutes left. So you actually could, Emma, great question. There is a course search option in the course calendar, and you can use it to sort of do a kind of a cross search of the entire database of courses and set filters like breadth requirement category. And I believe you can also, I think you can also try for search for course level, but otherwise you probably just need to sort of bounce around a little bit from place to place. And there is one more question, which is about the UTOR ID. And what a great question. Oh, and Anna has said basically that the answer would be is to talk to the TCARD office. They're the experts in trying to collect the information you need to be able to establish your UTOR ID and get that process started. Can you take Vic 1? Yep.
Can I just add to it? So Daniela, start with the TCARD office. If you were given a UTOR ID and you lost it, then information comments might need to help you. So I don't know at which stage you are with this. So start with the TCARD office and then determine, or they might tell you to also connect with information comments. Sorry, Tom.
Nope, thank you. That's great to add to it. Last question from Chris. Can I take Vic 100 courses and first year foundations courses concurrently? Yes. Remember that you're probably aiming for 1 credit in total. If it's 2 half courses in the same semester, 1 Vic 100 and maybe 1 first year foundation, that is fine. That's sort of the cap is really at sort of 1 credit in total. I think so. Although can make sure no head, shakes their head and tell me I'm giving wrong advice, but looks good so far. So this is great. The questions have been fantastic and taken us right to the end. I want to thank Professor Ira Wells for joining us today and being able to talk about all the great stuff that's on offer and Vic's commitment to the small class experience. Thanks to my colleague Anna, who's been monitoring and answering the chat questions like champs. And thanks to all of you who are also champs and have been asking great questions and getting engaged. It's so nice to see the numbers here. Looking so forward to being able to meet you beyond what I see, which is mostly a sort of a dark gray rectangle with white letters indicating who you are. I can't wait to meet actual faces, but I'm going to pull off on this one now because I think we have other sessions coming up. So thank you again.
I just wanted to say goodbye and thank you and to tell you that you picked the best possible fall to start university because we are so excited to be back and welcome you to campus. And I'm looking forward to meeting hopefully many of you in the fall. Thanks again for joining us for this session. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. And thanks, everyone. And stay around if you're looking for the Vic Residence Q&A. So goodbye, everyone. Have a great one.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Anna. Bye-bye.
Bye.